Hi folks, we're Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would, a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about some studies that have been doing the rounds in Britain and the US that suggest that juries, trial juries, if they're white, will convict anyone based on primarily the evidence, the facts, and this sort of stuff. The law, adherence to the law, non-adherence, violation of the law, and the hard factual issues. Whereas minority juries will very reliably find whitey guilty, but when it's one of their own, for primarily a black jury, very reluctant to find a black person guilty. It's a Hispanic jury or majority Hispanic, very reluctant to find the Hispanic person guilty. An Indian jury reluctant to find the Indian person guilty, and on it goes. So let's just have a look at this wider issue now. If an all-white jury finds the black guy guilty, that's racism, it's prejudice, Nazi, Hitler, fascist, whether the person's guilty or not guilty, it's kind of irrelevant. It's an issue of we need to be judged by our own people. And because we're a minority in a hostile majority, we don't like them, they don't like us, we don't trust them, they don't trust us. Because we're a minority and we break their laws, the majority's laws, the white laws, it's not really a crime because we've broken, we're in violation of laws that they say, they write and they create, and they say don't kill. But that brother, he was going to rip me off. He was making eyes at my woman, and I've got a right to kill him if he does that, And okay, the white folks say it's wrong to commit murder, but so they say that. But the law of the street that I abide by, that I live by, those laws don't exist. Why should I be found guilty of that when he was the one looking at my woman? I didn't make him look at my eyes, so I can kill him, and that's okay. And so there's very different concept of the law, responsibility, civic responsibility, civic duty. It's very different depending on which race you belong, which laws you think are applicable. White man's law is not legitimate. Okay, I live in white man's country and I benefit from all of the wealth of the white man's country and all the welfare and all that. Sure, but his law is not legitimate. His customs, his habits, his behaviors, his standards of behavior, none of those are legitimate. And I don't have to abide by them. So why should I be judged by him? Why should I be judged by his laws and by his all-white juries? I shouldn't have to be. It's wrong, it's prejudicial, it's this, it's Nazi, So it's a very different perception of the law and where it fits in and how it should be applied and who should be accountable to it, and indeed how they should be accountable. Now, the fact that there's more black people, relative to population percentages, there's far more black people in prison. Black people commit this. I'm assuming the United States, but we can look at England and get pretty much the same thing. The 4 or 5 black people are committing crimes at 4 or 5 times the rate of their percentage of the population. Now, yeah, okay, all right then, but they're breaking white man's law. That's not really law breaking. It's white man's law, white man's written laws, white man's codified laws. And, why should we have to worry? Why should we be accountable to that? Why? They're the racists, not us. This type of thing, and this thinking applies in any minority jury. For example, an all-woman jury or majority woman jury, the woman murders her husband. Yeah, but he was an abuser. You know what? He actually said misogynist things to her. So it's kind of okay if she murders him. It's not really murder because he was misogynist. So we've got this thing where it's okay to kill a Nazi. Who's a Nazi? Any white person, any straight white person is a Nazi. So it's okay to kill. Okay, well, misogyny and patriarchy, it's okay to kill a misogynist. What's misogynist? Any man who says something I don't like is a misogynist. And there's this increasing permission to mistreat, if not to kill. And we can call it dehumanizing, call it what you like, but increasingly this is seen as something that is permissible. And what he provoked me into it, that like I didn't really commit murder, it was his provocations. In the reverse, the provocation argument doesn't work. She provoked me, that's what, no, this is one way, buddy. So when we look at this thing of juries not convicting or reluctant to convict one of their own, now white people will convict anybody based on the evidence. Why is it that white people are able to look at the facts and look at the evidence and make a decision based on that, but minorities cannot? And if you're a minority in a white country, imported into the white country by the globalist cabal, and you're a minority there, and you come from a very strange, very different country and third world place where civic society doesn't exist, where enforcement of codified laws doesn't exist. None of these things exist in your country. And family law, tribal law, rural law, all this, these unspoken, uncodified, rando, arbitrary things exist. And you come to another place where things like codified law and what do exist, then it seems very, very, very strange. Why would anybody do that? My imam is the law. The village elder is the law. What are you talking about? This codified law and bureaucracies who independently and partially administer the law. I don't even understand that. Conceptually, I can't even grasp it. So when they get called to jury duty, these people, they apply the tribal law, the religious law, the Islamic law. They see the whole thing very differently, and they see the laws of the majority, the codified law, as something that marginalizes them and keeps them in some sort of social minority status. So they can argue, well, we don't agree with the law being codified and impartial and Parliament passing laws, and we don't agree with society. Damn it, we don't even understand it. So why should we be responsible and accountable to it? Well, we shouldn't be. You brought us here, you wanted us here, and we will do as we want. So when it comes to the jury duty and majority black jury, they're not going to convict the black guy. It doesn't matter if the black guy was guilty or not. That's not relevant. The facts are not relevant. It's the miasma of the vibe. That's not relevant. The facts are not relevant. It's the miasma of the vibe of the perception of reality that they have in their tribal street law or family, type a patriarchy type, that sort of thing. It's how they perceive it, and they don't perceive white people's laws, systems, customs, codified rules. None of that is really legitimate. And if they're held responsible or accountable for it, then they perceive that as an act of prejudice and malicious prejudice in their cognizance, at least. And this gets playing out in juries. So when the argument comes up, well, we should dispense with juries because minorities can't operate and function in juries. They give free passes to their own diaspora. Well, okay, you can go a number of ways there. Say that only you can only have people that will focus on the law and focus on the evidence and focus on the facts, and they should be rigorously examined before serving on juries. That's one way of doing it. Another way would be to ensure that minorities cannot serve in judgment of their own people. That could be another way of doing it. So you only get Indians that would serve on a jury to judge in a trial, to judge, say, black people, or only black people to judge Indians, or and that you could play around with that. But the reality is, or the requirement is, you must have an utterly impartial jury, and anything that fails to achieve that undermines the very essence of due legal process. You've been Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.